framework. Sometimes we also call this risk appetite framework as the operations risk management framework. So ORMF is another common name we talk about it. So what are the improvements and the developments that are happening across the different kinds of banks as far as the operations risk management framework is concerned, and also how IT infrastructure is really a value addition, or how IT infrastructure need to be synchronized to achieve a better risk management in the banks and financial institutions. So we will look out for the key elements relating to this effective risk appetite framework. What are the metrics that are associated with it, and probably how IT will enable in terms of the proper implementation of the same. So just to understand a risk appetite framework of an organization, it's a framework that decides the core risk strategy of the firm. When I say core risk strategy, it means probably what is the risk profile that the company should target, how much risk it has to accept, what risks it should avoid, what risks it should mitigate, what risks it should ensure. So one, and what are the kinds of risks, what are the kinds of broad risk categories, and how much risk to be targeted, like probably what is the measure of risk? Do we use value at risk as a measure? Do we use standard deviation as a measure? And if these are the measures that are used, what should be the target numbers associated with it? So keeping in view the broad business profile of the organization, this risk appetite framework is designed, which will help the senior managers in designing a core risk strategy for the improvement of their business, or probably it helps them to take calculated risk in their decision making, integrate risk management into the decision making. All these things can very comfortably be achieved using a solid risk appetite framework in the organizations. Then, if at all I am talking about developing such a kind of RAF statement, appetite framework statement, what all should be included into that statement? The first thing I look out for is the business profile. What are the kind of lines the business is operating into? What are the risks associated with each of the lines of business? Probably this is very heavy into retail loans but very less into commercial loans. Whereas some other bank could be more and more having a very big investment banking kind of operations but very less into commercial banking. So different lines of business could differentiate the risk profiles of the bank. So first understand the business profile mix of that bank and the balance sheet mix. So some key elements of the balance sheet like debt to equity ratio, right, the capital structure associated with it, the sources of funds, the way that the composition of the sources of funds, and it could also come to an extent of how much of liquid assets are there and how much of fixed assets are there. All these things, the composition of the balance sheet should be understood to a great extent. And risk preferences, what are the core risks for the bank company versus the non-core risks. Probably for a company which is manufacturing automobiles, the business related risk is always a core risk, but probably something to do with the market, something to do with the credit, they all go as a part of non-core because the company is not into the management of those things, but understanding the business, how much to produce, all those things go as a part of the core risk. So it may so happen that the company may accept the core risk, whereas it may diversify or hedge these non-core kind of risk. So we need to really understand as a part of the designing of the framework, we need to understand the risk preferences the companies have for each type of risk. When I say each type of risk, probably I'm looking at market risk, credit risk, operations risk, business risk, liquidity risk, so many such kind of risks. So I need to understand what is the priority or the preference of the company to each of those risks. Then I'm looking at